Yo, you tuned in to Phillipe the Philosopher, Prophet and the Poet. The life and times of Phillipe the Philosopher, Prophet and the Poet. So now you know it. I was born Phillipe, Washington, October 28, 1962 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, on the south side. I had two brothers and a sister. My oldest brother was named Edward Pittman. My sister's named Penny Walker. My brother, the second brother, was named Richard Washington. He was 2 years older than me. My oldest brother was 13 years older than me. My sister was 6 years older than me. I was the youngest. He said I was the baby. We grew up on 38th and 3rd, south side, and it was a nice little black neighborhood. And I went to school, grade school at Agassiz. Coming up in an era where there was a little bit of racism, but you know, black people had their own side of town that we lived in, and it was like a little segment, you know. And as long as we was east of Nicollet Avenue and going between Nicollet and Chicago Avenue, that was like the black neighborhood. And south side, since I was on 38th Street, we were like right in the heart of the black neighborhood. When I was a baby, I can remember some things going all the way back to when I was 2 years old. I remember my mom giving me a bath, and I was 2 years old, and she was bathing me in the sink. And I was sitting on the edge of the sink while she was bathing me. I can remember that. You know, I can remember a time when I was 2 and my oldest brother and my cousin Robert, my oldest brother Edward and my cousin Robert were playing with me out in the backyard, and I can remember them taking pictures of me and whatnot when I was 2 years old. My memory goes way back, way back. And we used to play in the house and stuff. Me and my brother, we used to wrestle and play football in the living room and stuff. Hopefully we didn't knock down the cabinets that my mom had with ornaments and stuff in the glass cabinet. We tried not to knock that down because we know we got our butts tore up, you know. But yeah, we played and did our thing. You know, there was a lot of kids in the neighborhood that I grew up with. We used to play out in the front yard. You know, we played baseball and football and stuff in the front yard. I had some friends that I went to school with, first grade. When I was in the first grade, I remember this white boy, he thought I was a pet, and he tried to rub the top of my head like I was a pet or something. And he said, "Oh, your hair is fuzzy," and I said, "What?" And then he called me a nigger. I slapped him, and then he took off running into the classroom, and the chase was on. I chased him, and then the teacher, she clotheslined me by the neck, put her arm out, and my back hit the deck, and I got up and I kicked her, and I said, "Motherfucker," kicked her. I had some hard shoes on, you know, and I kicked her in the shin. And her leg was messed up, and she had to put a brace on her leg. But when they called my parents and stuff to come to school, my parents came and they took me home and they tore my butt up. I mean, I got it, I caught it. But I just, you know, it was the 60s, and I just was not having it. I could not let a white person call me a nigga and get away with it. Okay, I was in first grade. It was about 1968. A teacher told me to be in this talent show, and I was kind of shy, you know. I thought, I said, okay, well, let me go ahead and try this. So me and a friend of mine named Hank Dobbins, we decided to be in this talent show. And I wrote this little script. And I used to watch Flip Wilson, because Flip Wilson show was on, and I used to like imitate Flip Wilson. And he used to say, nothing but the devil could have made you say that. Between me and my friend, his name was Hank Dobbins, we wrote a skit with Bill Cosby and Flip Wilson. I played Flip Wilson, he played Bill Cosby. I wrote the skit, and I was getting ready to perform, and I got out there and got ready to perform, but he was late getting there, and the teacher pulled me out there and told me I gotta go out, gotta go on. So I went out there and started my show and started to talk, and he was late, and next thing you know it, he came right on time. Come on, you gotta go out, you gotta go on. So she pulled me out there and told me to just put your eyes down, put your head down. So I closed my eyes, and I looked down, and I walked out on the stage, and I started doing my part, and he wasn't there yet. Finally, just when I did 1 or 2 lines, the crowd started laughing, and my friend got there and came on stage. He came out on stage just in time, when he came out on stage and finished the rest of the play. And then by the time I looked up at the audience laughed a couple times, you know, and I felt good, and then it felt good to me. And then I said, oh wow, it got good to me. So I was comfortable doing it. And then next thing you know, the crowd was responding and applauding and everything. So by the time they got to doing it, applauding and everything, I was like so glad. I almost didn't feel like walking off the stage yet. I felt like doing some more. But that was my spark to getting in front of a crowd and performing and getting the feeling of having the love coming from a crowd. So I was hooked on performing from that time on. We lived half a block away from this building they called Sabathani, and it used to be Bryan Junior High. Bryan Junior High was the high school that Prince went to junior high school with, and actually I believe Prince lived up the street about 3 blocks away, but I didn't know who Prince was back in the day. But one day I was at Bryan Junior High, and they had a band playing in the auditorium, and I came to the event, and it was so crowded in the auditorium that we had to wait in this other room outside of the auditorium. And we were in this other room, and I seen this little kid sitting in a chair, and he was playing the air drums. You know, he had some drumsticks, but he was pretending he was playing the drums, and he was listening to the band play. And I looked at him and I said, dang, he looked like a midget, sort of, because he looked a little older, his face looked older, but he was small and looked like a midget, sort of. And to this very day, I believe that was Prince. And I just didn't know it back in the day. I didn't know it, but that was Prince. You know, these are some of the things that we experienced back in the day when I was growing up. You know, I remember going to school, walking to school. We went to Agassiz Elementary School. And I remember walking to school. We used to do some things back in the day. I mean, we got into stuff. We used to throw rocks at cars on the freeway on 35W. You know, we used to do some things. But you know, this is some of the stuff that little kids do. You know, but there was a park a couple blocks away. Back then they called it Nicollet Field, and then later it became Martin Luther King Park. But yeah, we used to play at that field. Just go play baseball and stuff. And you know, my brother Richard, he was a couple years older than me. I remember he played parkour football. And he was, I guess 8 or 9 back then when we first started playing football. But yeah, we lived in their house, and then my parents were planning on moving out to the suburb, and we planned to get a house built from the ground up out in Eagan, Minnesota. And we lived there for, I was 8 years old when we moved. We decided to move out to the suburb to a house in Eagan, Minnesota. We was one of the first black families to live out there. We had a house built from the ground up and paid $40,000 to have a brand new house built. And I went to school out in the suburb, and white kids weren't used to seeing black people at all, hardly. And they would call us niggas and blackie and Sambo and all that, and I would beat their ass, put that black fist in their face. You know, we lived out there for 3 years until something tragically happened, and my parents were getting a divorce. And my father, to make a long story short, my father wound up killing my mother and killing himself. Living in the suburb kind of took some of the city out of my element. And next thing you know it, I started talking like some of them kids in the suburb. I started talking like some of the white boys after a while. We lived out there for 3 years. And we had a real nice house, nice yard. The grass was beautiful because they put grass turf out there, you know. And after a while, my parents got ready to get a divorce, and they were going through some issues. And I remember me, my sister, and my mom, we went out to eat one day with one of her friends, and we went out all day long, and we were talking and whatnot. And I remember my mom was telling her friend that she got to hurry up and get away from my dad before he wound up killing her. You know, my dad was from Chicago, and he was a gun-ho, gun-slinging, you know, outdoor two-fisted He-Man. He used to always tell me to be an outdoor two-fisted He-Man. But my dad was an outdoor two-fisted He-Man, for real, for real. And he was serious, and he would threaten to blow somebody's head off or something, you know. And he had guns in the house. My mom was terrified of guns because something happened and my mom got shot by a ricocheting bullet one time. She was out and about when she was young, and a bullet went up her arm, all the way up her arm, and she was terrified of guns, you know. And my dad always had guns, and so they were getting ready to get divorced. Me and my mom, my sister, and her friend went out, and when we came home that day, he was like, he called my mom and asked her to come upstairs and said, I gotta talk to you, come upstairs. And he said, are you okay, are you all right? And she went upstairs, and me and my sister went downstairs. We had bedrooms downstairs. And about a few minutes later, we heard some loud banging noises and some screams. My mom was screaming, we could hear her shuffling. And then we heard pop, 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 some loud banging noise. And we was getting ready to run upstairs, and Richard came halfway downstairs and said, Daddy just shot Mom, and then he shot himself in the head. And when that happened, it was really tragic, and it was almost like I was just hoping that it was maybe a dream that somehow just wasn't true. But reality could not be more real than that. And my sister, she fell in the middle of the street screaming, oh no, oh no! And we, you know, I picked her up and tried to pull her out the way because the car was coming and everything. We went to the neighbor's house and they called police and the ambulance and called some other people, called the pastor from the church my mom went to, and called some people, and they all came out, and we sat there that night, and my mom had got shot. My dad had shot my mom in the stomach, 3 places in the stomach, and then he put the gun to his head and shot himself in the head. My brother Richard was in the kitchen when it all happened, so he's seen it all. And my dad finally put the gun to his head and shot himself in the head, and that was terrible. And it was like I was just hoping that it was a nightmare that would somehow just I would wake up and it somehow it wouldn't be true or something, but it was reality, and that was one of the things we had to deal with. And then I was sitting there, and it really didn't hit me hard enough, and I was kind of calm and cool that night. But the next day, we went and stayed with my oldest brother, Edward. The next day, it really started hitting me, because I knew that I wouldn't see my mom again, I wouldn't see my dad again, and I love my mom, I love my mom. I remember times she used to feed me with food. She'd be cooking, and while she was cooking, she would take some of the samples and feed it to me in my mouth, and if I tried to grab it with my hand, she would pull it away and wait till I just open my mouth and feed me. So she used to spoil me and stuff. And my dad, he used to teach me a lot of things. My dad was very smart mechanically and whatnot. He used to teach me to build things. I remember he'd buy me all these model planes and ships and boats and cars and stuff, and I used to put them together, and I was very young, and I wound up being good at it, and those are some, things that my parents instilled in me. I love both my parents, even though they were going through what they were going through, but we wound up moving back to Minneapolis and staying with my oldest brother, Edward, on the south side of Minneapolis. And I was like, what? I could not believe what had just happened. I had to go back to Minneapolis and start junior high school in a whole other neighborhood. So I went to Anthony Junior High, and when I was going to school, I was good in math because the school I went to out in Egan was a little more advanced. So I was about 2 years ahead of most the average students in that class, Anthony. So I took a higher math class, like 2 years higher than what was required. And I also took drum class because I felt like drums was in the soul of black people. It felt like it would be fun to play the drums, so I started playing the drums, and just so happened to be, I wound up being one of the best drummers in that class. And so my teacher excelled me into the next year. In my 8th grade, he excelled me into the next grade, which was an orchestra band. And then they only selected like 4 drummers to be in the orchestra. And so I was playing in the orchestra band. And I remember one of my friends I went to school with named Mark Brown. He heard that I was good in the drums and everything. And he had a band, him and one of my other friends named George Scott. They were in a band, him and Kenny Price. They had a band called Fantasy back in the day, and they were in junior high, and they used to play in like hotels, Holiday Inn and stuff like that. And Mark Brown said if I could get the drums, that I could be the drummer in their band. And he told me if I get the drum set, I could keep it, at his house, because he said his mom, was okay with it, and I could keep the drums in his basement and play. So I asked my oldest brother, I said, I want to get a drum set, and I can keep it at Mark Brown's house. My oldest brother said, "No, you can't. I don't want no drums," because he thought I was gonna have the drums in the house and be playing drums, and he figured he wouldn't be able to sleep. He'd be, hearing all that loud noise, and he wouldn't be able to go to work and whatnot. So he said no, and that messed me up, and I was so hurt by that. But my brother wasn't flinching. He stood on principles on what he said, so I couldn't get it. So I wound up actually quitting the drum class, because I thought, if I can't play, I wanted to play like some funk music, They had me playing all this orchestra music, and it was kind of boring to me. But I wish I could have got that drum set and started playing the drums early on, because, who knows where I would have been. I went on to go to high school, to Washburn High, and I played football in junior high, but when I got into Washburn, I played soccer, and I broke my ankle, and I was like on crutches for 6 months. And when I got off the crutches, I started walking. I had a slight limp, but for some reason, I must have started walking cool, because people started calling me Cool Breeze, and they said I was real cool, and they called me Pimpin' Phil and all this stuff, and I used to dress sharp, and they said, Pimpin' Phil, never work, never will, and they used to give me all the nicknames and said, player, what up? You a player? Yeah. And I developed this cool style. I think Morris Day stole my style, what he said, so I couldn't get it. So I wound up actually quitting the drum class, because I thought, if I can't play, I wanted to play like some funk music, They had me playing all this orchestra music, and it was kind of boring to me. But I wish I could have got that drum set and started playing the drums early on, because, who knows where I would have been. But yeah, I continued living with my oldest brother for a couple more years until I was 18. And, I used to get into some things, when you're like 15, 16, you get into some things. I got in trouble a few times. I remember my brother had to come get me out the juvie facility a couple times, and got into some stuff hanging with one of my friends. He went and hung out in Baltimore. He went and lived in Baltimore for a couple summers, and he came back. He was bringing all that Baltimore stuff back, and he started getting me into trouble. His name was Terry Bailey. And we was partners, for a while, and I grew up. By the time I was 17, I graduated high school, and I decided to go to a technical school called Minneapolis Technical Institute. So I started school to be a technician, and I was still 17 when I first started, for about a month or so, and then I turned 18. And when my parents died, I had this thing that they would give me a certain amount of money from my mom's Social Security and gave me a certain amount of money from my dad's uh, um, military benefit, being a veteran. So I had money that was stacking up, and my oldest brother put it in accounts so that it would save money and put it in saving certificates and whatnot. So when I turned 18, I had like $12,000. I couldn't wait to get that money and start spending. First thing I did, I bought me a Datsun 260Z, and I used to drive that thing. I used to go back and forth to Chicago. My father was from Chicago, born and raised. He took me there a couple times when I was young, when I was a kid. So I started going out, hanging in Chicago and whatnot. I even told people I was from Chicago when I came back to Minneapolis, because I liked the way the Chicago style was. Everybody had this certain type of finesse in Chicago, and it was a lot faster than Minneapolis. So I used to claim I was from Chicago, and it was kind of cool. And people started calling me Cool Breeze. Too cool. I mean, even when I was in high school, they used to call me Too Cool, because I used to walk so cool and dress. I used to dress with finesse. I had some sharp clothes, and they used to call me Cool Breeze, Too Cool. They said, "Oh, you too cool because you just too cool." And so in that time of that era, I was like 18 and 19, I used to be real cool, dress sharp and whatnot. But by the time I turned 20 and 21, by the time I was 21, I got into Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson hit me. I was in Chicago one time, and people were walking around selling memorabilia, selling pins and buttons and whatnot, with Michael Jackson image on it. And I was like taken by the Michael Jackson, the music and everything that he was doing at the time, and the songs that came out and the videos that he released. When he released Thriller and Beat It and Billie Jean, they were so popular and they were getting played all the time. When I came back to Minneapolis, I started trying to dress like Michael Jackson. A little later on, I met this girl named Marie, and we had a baby. She got pregnant, and we had a baby. And she was into Michael Jackson, Prince, really tough. And she got me into Michael Jackson. Next thing you know, I started imitating Michael Jackson, doing all the moves. I guess the Minneapolis music scene was taken over, and everybody in Minneapolis they were kind of jealous of Michael Jackson. Even Prince. I remember going to First Avenue, and I walked past Prince one time going up the stairs on First Avenue. Prince walked by me and kind of looked at me and kind of sneered. And the next thing I knew it, I was kicked out of First Avenue and I couldn't come back in. And I was wondering what the reason was, but I believe it was because Prince seen me imitating Michael Jackson. I didn't want to hang around me, so jealousy. And I would even open for a band that would play some of the local clubs, and when I performed, they would let me perform during their breaks. And when I performed in between the breaks, I got such a good applause. The people would scream and holler. The band seemed like some of the people in the band were a little jealous, but there was a few people in there. I remember a dude named Rick, and he was kind of cool with me, and he was cool that I did Michael Jackson. Another dude named Maurice, they were cool with it, but a couple other guys that would seem like they were a little jealous and stuff, Um, the dude Rick, he wound up being the bass player in Mint Condition, you know. And there was a lot of people that I knew back in the day that I hung out with. They remember me from doing Michael Jackson, listening to Prince music. I listened to all of Prince's records. I mean, I remember this girl gave me about 7 of Prince's records, and I listened to 7 of his records all the time, over and over, and I memorized them and got into it. And so I got more so into the Minneapolis music scene. I stopped doing Michael Jackson, and then I decided I was going to do my own thing. I went to modeling school because I said, man, I really want to be in the music business and do this thing. So I went to modeling and acting school at Plaza 3, and that helped me to be professional as a music entertainer. Once I got into doing like video footage, video shoots, I was in a Jesse Johnson's music video, Be Your Man. That was my first professional music video, being an extra. I started getting into the music scene from Minneapolis, the Prince scene and Time and everything. And I started writing my own lyrics and music and whatnot. I had a roommate named Kenny Westmoreland. He was from Racine, Wisconsin. His friends came up from Racine to Minneapolis, and they wound up forming the band Exotic Storm. I decided to put out my own record, and I came up with a song called Foot Fantasy, and put that out and released it on Wax. Dropped it off at the record stores and radio stations, and I got played on KMOJ 89.3 FM, and started doing shows. I did a showcase at First Avenue, and people started recognizing me. Hooked up with producer friend George Scott, who he was playing since he was like real young, probably 7 or 8, playing bass and guitar and all that. He had a studio in his house in 1987, and he asked me to come work with him. I started working with him, and he said I could put out another record and make it.
Can you guess Phillipe's age then?
25?
You're correct. 25. We do have a correct answer, finally, and you're going to win a copy of Phillipe's 2-song 12-inch EP entitled, and it has songs called Can I Follow You and Work Shuffle. So just hold on the line, and we'll get your name and number and that kind of thing, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Walker, for calling in. You finally did it, Phillipe.
Hot. So we did 2 songs. We did Can I Follow You and the Work Shuffle. Can I Follow? It was like, baby, can I follow you home? Follow you to the end of the line. Baby, I've been watching you. Want to know what's on your mind. And it was like, hey, hey, hey. It had, real funky bass line, and I wrote it and co-produced, and he co-wrote and produced, and it became a hit. And then I also did the Work Shuffle on the B-side, and it was like, do the work shuffle, do the work shuffle, and Can I Follow You was the jam. It got the most airplay. You could hear it on the radio each and every day. Any club, any station all across the world this year. I was American, become a sensation. But yeah, that song became popular. And they played it on KMOJ 10 times a day for about a year straight. And it was like getting bad play. Everybody was doing it. It was playing in clubs. I go to 3 different clubs in one night, and they play it. I'd walk in the club, and all of a sudden it would come on. And I'd hear it play. And the DJ let me come up in the booth and hype the crowd. Throw your hands in the air, wave them like you just don't care. You know, and it got me a lot of play. I got featured at the Minnesota Black Music Awards Showcase. I won a Satban Video Award for Best Local Video. And I was just doing all kinds of things. I got played on Radio Scope Showcase, Lee Bailey's Radio Scope Showcase around the country. It was marketed to 300 R&B markets around the country. And they played it on the showcase. And they said when they played it, they tried to say it sounded like Prince. A couple years later, I just kept writing a few songs, and I worked with Nigerian producers named Ben and Kazir. They produced a couple songs for me, and I wrote a couple songs. Me and George worked on a couple more other songs that were never released, but one of the songs I did called Space Age New Wave Music, I played it at it was a songwriting demolition. They call it songwriting demolition. It was like a seminar, and they had some publishers and whatnot there at the showcase. And I played my song, and I got #1 best liked song out of 75 songwriters that had their song in the showcase. And one of the guys that had his song in the showcase, his name is Lance Alexander. He's a producer now. He's been producing with Flight Time and other people and stuff. And he produced Low Key and some other group. He was in the demolition, but they wasn't feeling his song at the time. It was mostly white people there, you know. But yeah, I had some major things happen. Then I got into hip hop. I was in a showcase at Glam Slam, and the news happened to come there, and they featured, like, they spotlighted about 4 people, and they happened to spotlight me. And I was in there. I did a song called Suckers, and I'm like, yo, this is Phillipe coming to you with a peace sign, you know what I'm saying? And I threw that peace sign out there, and I said, this is for you, you suckers. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. You suckers won't even help little people out. You suckers. Yeah, boy, this jam's for you. You suckers. Let me kick verse 2. They started faking and flaking and perpetrating and shaking. I started baking the cake and I put a file in it so I could bust them out with the funky rhyme and let the suckers know that it's my time. I'm coming up. I'm on and on and I'm strong. If you think you can hold me down and you're wrong, take that, you seller. You better get the hell up. You better try to lay down because I'm about to spray down. If you fake the funky flake, you jump, you better step off and bite a hunk of my chump. Yeah, when I did that song, everybody was liking it and feeling it. And the next couple of days, I'd go out and about. I'd be in the store, and a little 10-year-old kid would walk up and say, you suckers, and imitate me and stuff, you know. So after that, the news wanted to do a follow-up interview, and they selected the 4 people, had us come back and do a follow-up interview. The promoter, Paul DeMonte, booked me to do some shows after that, and it was almost like I had a hit, but it was only just me performing off of making some tracks off my 4-track at home and performed it live, and I never released it, but I was getting the kind of play as if I just released another song as a rapper this time. But I started getting into pro-black consciousness during the Rodney King rebellion. The verdict of Rodney King led to the rebellions and stuff going on around the country. I started getting into pro-blackness and fighting the power, fighting against police brutality, fighting racism. And I started, you know, just writing real conscious, militant music and lyrics. You know, I did a song called FW People. If you know what I'm saying, if you know what I'm saying, FW People. Read between the lines, y'all. FW People. If you know what I'm saying, if you know what I'm saying, FW People. And, you know, if you read between the lines, that stood for fuck white people. For those that can't read. Anyway, I was doing, calling in on the radio, on KMOJ, doing poetry. I started talking about the current situations that was going on and reading my poetry on the air. And the host on the show, Ron Edwards, I think the show was called Black Focus. He said, one day I called in and he said, I used to call in and say, this is the philosopher. And he said, no, you a prophet and a poet. And I said, oh, I don't know if I can fill them shoes. He said, no, I mean it, brother, for real. You a prophet and a poet. And I was like, wow, what do you know? Phillipe the Philosopher, the prophet and the poet.
I could turn on the news and I see all kinds of things going on around the world. The United States bombed Iraq, and then they were in Somalia on a so-called humanitarian mission.